This is the Pathway Navigation Community of Practice virtual meeting held on June 13th, 2019. The following is an excerpt from that meeting entitled Promising Practice, Using Data to Inform a Student Intake Form.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, this is Claudia Strata-Howe from San Diego Mesa College, and I'm going to put my San Diego Mesa College hat on and put the regional hat behind here for just a second to present this. So today I want to talk to you about using data to inform a student intake form. So this topic is really going to be centered around the San Diego Mesa College student intake form or survey that is called Mesa Journeys. And this particular intake, as Sylvie mentioned earlier, is something that was presented on at the first Community of Practice back in February by Leroy Johnson and Charlie Wu, and that presentation is available at the in the resource library. So definitely, if you've never heard of Mesa Journeys in our intake form, I do recommend that you go to that particular reference and take a look at what our full intake form is currently and what it looks like and so forth. But this particular presentation is really speaking to and as a result of some of the themes that we saw in your progress reports. There were some questions surrounding the student intake about data. There were questions about where do we begin in terms of what data do we have to gather to create our form, and also questions surrounding what do we do once we have that information. So it really got me to think that you know, in terms of San Diego Mesa College, our journey, no pun intended, in this process really have had a variety of ups and downs and lessons learned. So really through this presentation, I want to walk you through what that looked like for us. So we're going to take a little bit of a journey back in time before that presentation on what we currently already have and talk to you more about what it took to get there, and again, the lessons learned and process, and the data that we use to inform that. Okay, so first I wanted to start with this quote. I love quotes. This is a very, very powerful quote for me. It speaks to me a lot, because for those of you who know me or those that don't know me, I love data. I like to look at how we could change some of the work we do with data. So Stephen Levitt from Freakonomics said, "Data, I think, is one of the most powerful mechanisms for telling stories. I take a huge pile of data and I try to get it to tell stories." So really and truly, that's what I'm going to do today. I want to really capture and sort of share with you the story of Mesa's process in this student intake. I've also been practicing a lot of Brene Brown's vulnerability. So today I'm going to definitely talk to you about those challenges and sort of how we plugged our way out of those.
Claudia, before you get started, Scott is asking, I hope you can address how you're using or planning to use CCC Apply data along with Journeys input from students in directing them to their next steps.
Yeah, definitely. I'll probably touch on that towards the end as one of the next steps. So definitely remind me, but yeah, we'll definitely touch on that a little bit. Okay, so how we started. So I'm going to give you, again, we're going to go back in time here, and we started back for this work in 2017. There were a group of folks from our campus, a couple of counselors and some directors and supervisors that went to Pasadena City College and you know, got a dose of their fabulous guided pathways work and really looked at all of all of their processes and what they had done, brought that information back with excitement, and it was picked up, of course, by our fabulous Vice President of Student Services, Dr. Ashanti Hands, who at the time was tasked with beginning our guided pathways work. And she thought, gosh, this is really important, and everyone's really excited. Let's think of what we can do here in student services to move some of this work along. So what we knew in the beginning was that our students had and continue to have a difficult time finding our services and programs. So some of the reasons could be that maybe, from the fact that our acronyms sometimes don't speak to our students. Not all students that are incoming may know what EOPS means, or even our current students, to some of our localities and timing of our programs. What we knew about us was that we didn't really know what our students were experiencing on their end. We knew, that we have certain peak periods. We knew that there's, certain onboarding happening at certain times. But really, when we were looking at equity and just looking at all of our student populations, we didn't really know how to capture that, what student experience was. And we also knew that we needed to provide a more intentional way for our students to find us in terms of our services and what we could provide students to help them with retention and success for their programs. So with all of that, we really thought what we needed to do as our main objective was to map out our students' journey. We thought, okay, we really need to know what our students go through when it comes to onboarding, when it comes to touching point with any of our services, from getting that information. And we thought, what a better way to do this than with our service and program data. So what we did, we had a group of fantastic folks. There was about 6 to 8 of us that got together to really start this work, and again with the support of our guided pathways work at the time and our vice president, and we started to develop a methodology, if you will, on how we would capture some of this data in a way that would really inform this work. We really wanted to know what our students' journey, and for those of you familiar with marketing, it's very similar what we were trying to do to customer mapping. So we really wanted to know what touch points our students were engaging with us, because again, at the time we thought that is how we will really know what intentional things and ways we can do to get them connected to our programs. So we ventured on that journey. We called it Mesa Journeys because we saw it as a journey for ourselves, but we definitely wanted to add Mesa to that mix. We always Masonize everything at Mesa. So we came up with this very informal sort of document. It was called our Mesa Journeys program template, and what we sought to do was we asked all of our programs and services in the student services side of the house. So for this particular piece, we did not include instructional programs. So when I refer to programs, as I walk you through this, I'm referring to student services programs and services. So we sent this out to all of those programs and services, and we asked them, very simply put, let us know your timeline. Let us know when your applications are out. Is there an application required for your program or service? Do you provide appointments for students? Do you have walk-ins? Do you do any type of assessments or intakes? How do you communicate with your students? Do you do it in a timeline-based way, or is there different touch points or popular months that you're communicating? What are the very specific deadlines that your programs or services have that students need to know about? Are there large events that happen for your program or service every year that you let students know about, or that you would like to have students know about that you do? What are your marketing timelines? When are you sending out flyers and information regarding your program and or events or services? Do you have an orientation? So we asked all the services and programs, is there an orientation or some sort of information session where students get to come in and learn about your program or get onboarded for your program or service? What are your recruitment efforts and timeline? When are you recruiting students? You know, some of the programs do have application periods, but before that application could be filled out and submitted, there was some recruitment happening. So what did that look like? Workshops, what were the workshops and when were they happening throughout? And then the other piece was student-initiated contact. Do you have heavy traffic at a particular time? Like, does your program notice a heavy flow of emails coming in, you know, before your recruitment season or before application deadlines or special events and such? Additionally, the layer that was added that we wanted to know from the program was, because we are part of a multi-school district, were there any district dates or actions that your programs abided by or had to follow or connect students on? You know, any other things also in terms of ongoing things that you have available for students all year long? What did those look like? What were those? Maybe they were walk-ins, or maybe they were just any kind of drop-in, you know, Q&A opportunities. We wanted to know, were there any intermittent things happening? So any planning, anything that you needed to connect to students with? You know, maybe your program every year had a survey that you sent out to your students to inform the development of next year's program. So any touch point with students is really what we wanted to know about. And then we also wanted to know, was any of this mandatory? And were there any follow-up services or points of contact with your students? And then, of course, you know, folks let us know naturally if it was a priority, you know, or if it was just something that happened once a semester or you know, every so often. So this was something that we sent out to all the programs and services, and everyone was, you know, in a scurry to get that submitted for their programs. Folks worked. This is an example of the one we filled out for my Career Center, and I worked with two of my staff members, Danielle Short and Olivia Piccola. We really literally sat down and mapped out our processes for the Career Center, right? That was the example that I have up here. So all of those were submitted. All of those were submitted to the Mesa Journeys team. And what happened was, well, definitely, and I said I was going to use vulnerability to guide this, but definitely a sense of overwhelming, you know, part of it was joy, because we had never seen so much really neat information, but definitely overwhelming, oh my gosh, where do we begin? Where do we begin is really what happened. Our wish came true. Where do we begin? So we sought the help of technology. This was not to be avoided. We definitely decided, gosh, we literally cannot sit here and create Excel sheets for this. We really didn't want folks to fill out an Excel sheet because we felt it might feel a little too, you know, too stagnant, and the Word document just seemed friendlier. But now we were tasked with what do we do with all that data? We had so much data, so much information. So what our group was able to find was a website called, at the time, this has changed since, but at the time it was called The Pulse, DAPULSE.com, which was is a project management tool. It has since changed its name to Monday.com. And I will say the only reason we went with this tool was, well, it was free. That was important. It was free, so it was the right price, and it allowed for multiple users to work on the one project. And again, at the time, this was just, I know since then there's so many new tools out there that I've since learned about for project management, but at the time, this was really the most organized way. So we went ahead and started coding and tracking. So let me take you into the website. I just really briefly want to show you all of our data, just to give you an idea of the amount of work that went into this. Okay, workboard. Okay, so the first thing we did was we coded the departments in student services or programs in color. So you see the accounting office was green, admissions was purple, assessment was orange, and so on and so forth. You kind of get the idea. Then we also coded our categories. So if it was a communication category, it was blue, and assessment was red, something ongoing was green, and so on and so forth. So you could see kind of the coding that went on there. And then we also were able to chart out the timelines for those specific things that took place for that department and or service. And again, one of the really neat things and reasons we used this particular website, and I'm not saying to go use it, by the way. Remember, in the beginning I said these are challenges and lessons learned, so I'll get to that in a minute. But at the time, it did provide some useful things. It has a feature where you can add different views, and we added a timeline view so that we were able to look at all of our data by the timeline of it, and that it was submitted. I'll show you, sort of take you back to our most poignant time frames right here. So it allowed us to see everything as students. We're basically seeing it happen, which was all at once. And then this lets you download it into that infamous Excel sheet that none of us wanted to do manually. So that was really, really helpful at the time. That was really helpful. This, however, once we downloaded the Excel sheet, is what it looked like. This is just 3 months, and I highlighted August for you, and I actually had to cut some of the bottom off. But on the side, and I know you can't read it, and that wasn't the point, was to read every detail in there, but there's 3 months. That was July, August, and September. This is just 3 months of what our students were potentially getting hit with. Whether it was an email, an activity, a deadline, you know, something. So that was crazy making. And so what happened was we had to take a moment to breathe. We almost had to hold each other's hands through this. We realized the data was too complex. By the way, we were able to present this at our it's called a Student Services Leadership Council retreat for Mesa that our vice president holds every year. And we were able to present this information and show everyone how complex this work was. We got feedback from them. We definitely received different set of feedback in which we definitely learned, took that feedback back to our Mesa Journeys group and learned. But what it boiled down to was the data was too complex. Each student has a variety of needs, right? It really made us confront the idea that I mean, we know every student's unique, we know that, but how complex that really is in that uniqueness, right? It was very time consuming to continue to put all this data in, and data changed, right? Different dates changed, deadlines changed. We would have had to basically constantly do this every quarter or so just to keep up with deadlines that can change. And then we also realized the differences between the student services and the special programs or the student service programs like Start Trio and different things. So that the key difference we learned from was that there's a difference between these cohort programs. They seemed a lot more streamlined. They seemed to have a lot more specificity in their deadlines and timelines, versus services were just so much more broad and widely touched upon students. They're open through the summer. They had different dynamic. So what we decided to do is really bring it back to basics, right? When in all failure, sometimes you sort of, and I say failure only in the sense that it didn't get to the essence of what I think we were trying to do. Although I must say it was a huge success in that we gathered all this fantastic information that, we really, none of us working in student services had really known and seen before. But we really realized that we had to go back to basics, put in a new direction to the project, and look at probably focusing for now at our students cohort programs. So programs that we knew had a set group of students, had a set group of processes that were not so widely open as some of the services are. So our new objectives became designing a student intake form that would allow us to gather the student data to better inform them about these cohort programs and timelines and services, and to help them connect through that to the services and the programs by having learned from those opportunities. We wanted students to be able to identify for themselves based on their criteria, their place in our system, what relevant resources would benefit them. So we really moved the ownership back to that student and sort of redirected the work away from the programs or services. Because really and truly, if you look, back to this slide, there was no way we were going to tell folks, okay, there's too many orientations happening during that month. Some of you have to move your orientation. That just was not feasible. Really more so providing that in-time information, giving students more information so that they can make those better judgments for themselves. And that's really, truly what an intake is. It's allowing students to get clear, better, and in-time information, which is what our guided pathways work really calls for students. So, and then the other piece we wanted our intake to do was to promote community and establish rapport with our students. As I mentioned earlier, we knew that our services and programs weren't being utilized as much as they had potential to, or have potential to. So we really wanted our students to be able to promote that community amongst each other, having that opportunity to establish some sort of rapport with their programs, whether it's visiting a website that they would, for one of our programs that they wouldn't have otherwise, done on their own. So mapping our students' journey was no longer our process and direction. We moved forward on, again, looking towards giving students the ownership to what they wanted to seek out and find. So with that, we came back and created a new form to gather data for our programs. We focused on those cohort programs. We had about 15 programs at the time that we were targeting. We did learn, again, from that first round in terms of what people ended up, or what programs and services ended up submitting on their form. We were able to generate 55 questions, and the link is on this PowerPoint that you will have access to the entire form, so you could, go to it, click through. But our basic key areas for our 55 question form were recruitment was the first page. We just wanted to know what their recruitment processes were. Did they have, what timeline? Did they have applications? So on and so forth. their population. We wanted to know what their population, did they have a special population that was required to be part of their program? Was it for our Latinx folks? Was the program specific to our formerly incarcerated students? Was it for our foster youth? We wanted to get that information. And then we wanted to know what their requirements were for this program. If a student gained information about their program, what were the requirements? Did they have to have a certain GPA? Did they have to be enrolled? Or could it be information that a prospective student in the high schools could really take a lot of value from? And what was the communication like? That was the other part of the survey. What was the communication like for the students? So in gathering all of that information, and by the way, this Excel sheet is also our 55 question Excel sheet is available in the resource library under the intake piece. It's something that's available for all of you if you're wondering what those questions are. But like I said, you can also follow this link to take the survey yourself. It's closed, so it's okay if you go in and fill it out at the time. Okay, so from that, we were able to, and I won't go too much into detail because I know in our intake presentation, Charlie and Leroy do a phenomenal job in talking about exactly, what questions were detailed in the survey and how we came up with those questions. But from those 55 questions, we basically coded it down to 10 overlapping questions that if we ask students these 10 questions, these programs are gonna come up as a results page for the students so that they could seek those programs. We also learned that bringing back those student services, that there were default student services that all students should really just have access to. So we included those in our Mesa Journey. Mesa Journeys is live. We currently have over 1,000 users. It is open to prospective and current students. So when you're thinking about collecting student data and what you're going to do with it, this was a very important conversation that we had to have because there's different things you can do with prospective student data and different things you can do with current student data. So what I mean by that is our prospective student data, some of our programs and our services are for current students. You must be a student. However, there is a lot that can be said to informing our prospective students in some of the programs that may be available to prospective students. So that's why for us, we had that conversation and we kept it open that the data would be utilized in those two formats. So it's really important when you're looking at your intake that you do at least have that discussion. You don't have to decide right this second, but just have that discussion because an intake form should definitely happen early on, in the student's process. But their situation can change. A student may become homeless and may need a slew of different resources. So again, that's sort of why we did both for our intake. So each of our student data groups is, meaning for each program in our service, is given directly to that program coordinator. And that person was trained on how to use this data. They were trained in order to get access to the data. They were trained on how to use it, how they could follow up with those students, what it meant to do it in time, just in time, and what it meant to code those students as someone they've already connected with. And again, the other presentation touches a lot more on that. Okay, so some of the challenges and strategies. So what we learned, just kind of overall, this one's a given. I think most of us in this field know that this first bullet really can speak to all of us, that using data can be overwhelming at times. And when it comes to a student intake, it definitely, there's a lot of data points to consider, right? Whether it's programmatic service available. One piece we personally have not moved on so much yet is including instructional program data and or information. So that's another piece. As a kind of another piece, I know Scott mentioned earlier, how are we using our application data to inform the intake? Well, for San Diego Mesa College, our CCC Apply, we just went live with that in April. So for us, we're early in the process of those discussions. We're early in the process of what this will look like with, given that we now have the CCC Apply tool and other things. So we are not there yet. We learned that stories, yes, data is a way to tell a story, but we learned that sometimes it has a different ending than what we expect. And like I said, we started with mapping our students' journey or our student, our customer experience to let's just help the customer know what we have available. Let's start with that. So my hope is that most of you that have brought up the idea of mapping, your student's journey, that my recommendation in particular is to definitely keep that as a project that if you have the time to explore, but that you don't have to have that done in order to do an intake form. Okay, you really, really don't. Just redirect, keep going. And really train. We really, Charlie Liu really spent a lot of time training folks on how to use this data. And, it's just really, 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 really important. It's not so much getting stuck on, is the data correct? Is it exact? It's really training them on the fact that we have this information. Let's get to our students as soon as possible. Really, this is about the student and being student-centered and using the information to benefit the students and move them through the process of what our programs and services are so that they can, rise in success and retention areas. So our next steps in our process, we have, with all this data that we've collected and learned from, we've never stopped learning from it ourselves and readjusting. So we have currently completed Mesa Journeys 2.0 version. The group worked really, really hard on these discussions and reiterations and just gathering all the feedback from our campus. We did road shows and just kind of learned from folks on our campus. And we're happy to go live with our new version June 26th, and I put that very specific date because it actually coincides. We're going live with it at our summer cruise program, which is one of our summer bridge and orientation programs. We're going to have over 1,000 students just during our summer cruise program utilize this tool to drive their specific services and programs that are useful to the students. They'll be able to have a results page that gives them all of that. And then we'll be able to reach out to these students, all the different programs, we'll be able to reach out to the students. We've improved a couple of visual features. And again, those will be available after June 26th for you to actually see the link. But things like the email button for students is a little friendlier. We've added an option for them to add a phone number. That was feedback that we received from all of our programs and services. When you develop your student intake, there's different ways you can use the tool. I know some campuses use it in terms of informing their counseling area to talk to students on different topics. Others use it in terms of services. Others use it in terms of providing certain orientations for students. So for us, we learned that our programs and services wanted student phone numbers so that they can call students or text students when they have, an exciting event or deadline or something that the students need to know about. We informed a lot of our work from, you know, in 2017, it was a lot of like just hit or miss in learning from, you know, Pasadena and the folks that had gone there. But we really have learned from and it's in the resource library from the Wisconsin example. It's been really helpful. We have on this PowerPoint, I have another link to a really great online intake form from Indiana University, which very much mirrors ours. It's very similar, but they use their data through their advising center to inform the students' advising appointment. So it's just really neat to kind of look at all the nuances and different ways that people are using, or that schools are using their intake. That's sort of all I have for you. These are all the fabulous folks that you know have been part of this work. As you go to your campuses and you're establishing how to do this work, just know it definitely takes a village, and you know, keep going. Just keep going.
So Jen Lewis says, now that you know more about project management software, what would you recommend a college use if we're starting the process?
So to me, what I learned, I think what we all learned, is that simple was best. It really starts with what information are you trying to gather. We started to 30,000 foot level. You know, we wanted every single program information and just everything anyone could provide. So I would say that any project management software would work, as long as it's not overwhelming your data entry person. So if you have really defined questions and data that you're collecting, any platform should work. You know, the one we use should work just fine when you don't have pages and pages of data. It really, that's the key, is to really just focus on just those top things you really need to know to inform your intake. I will say that our intake was only 5 questions when we first started it. It boiled down to only 5 questions for students. We've since grown to 10 questions because we gathered a little more information. But when you peel the onion back, the layers of the onion, just really focus on what you're trying to gather, and any project management tool should work. So that I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, it just basically boiled down to we overwhelmed our own process. We had too much information.
Okay, great. Leroy says that we're hearing success stories from our Mesa Journeys programs. Our UMOJA, I don't know what that acronym is, I'm sorry.
UMOJA program.
Okay, their program coordinator is getting more student information than ever and is really excited.
Thank you, Leroy. Yeah, that was actually an added benefit that happened with our student intake that we didn't even realize was going to be a key element, was that in our district, we have a really difficult time communicating with our students because there's a lot of security layers, and we don't necessarily have student contact information and ways to reach our students. So the added benefit to this intake form was it actually provided programs, not just the students, it provided programs and services, a way to contact the students more intentionally and on time.
Right. Okay, the next one is from Scott, asking about how the Mesa Journeys is connected to CCC Apply for new students. Does it come before the application process? And how will students get access to the program, and how will it be marketed to them to complete the journey?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Yeah, so we are currently in the process, the Mesa Journeys team is in the process of looking at that. As I mentioned earlier, we just went live with CCC Apply. So currently it doesn't, but we have our Mesa Journeys tool. It's going to be used by every single incoming student that participates in our summer cruise program, which is, like I said, over 1,000 new students are participating in that program. We also have the link in our online orientation. It's a message the students receive after completing their online orientation. to the link to the intake form to Mesa Journeys. We also have it, or plan to have it under helpful guide for services to students. And we are currently looking at additional tools like CCC MyPath, which connects to the CCC Apply tool. And we're hoping to house it there so that we can have the tool available for our students. We have, for now, decided that we want to keep our tool because it allows us a lot more flexibility in adding, removing, or making any changes. So for us, it's just what has worked.
Okay, great. We have a couple of questions from John. Sorry if I don't say your name right. John Cressidi, is that right? I think John is a faculty member at Mesa. He says the cohort form shown in the slide doesn't look like the Mesa Journey questionnaire. What are the differences? Can we see the cohort form? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. John, you might be looking at the new 2.0 version. If Joel over at our campus just put it up, it has slightly changed. But again, you will be able to see that on the resource library. If you look at Leroy and Charlie's presentation, they are speaking to the first Mesa Journeys intake form, and you can kind of learn about it there. Yeah.
And then John also asks, what are plans to incorporate instructional faculty into the questionnaire? As far as I know, I'm the only instructional faculty member attending your meetings.
Yeah, hi John, and I think John, just so everyone knows, he's actually at Mesa. He's part of the Pathway Navigation group, which has also been working with our guided pathways work, and he has such a really vast amount of knowledge in the instructional side, and we really are looking at what ways we could incorporate in some instructional programming into this intake form. We're just not there yet. I think we need to gather more information, learn a lot more about what that would look like, the process. This is a work in progress, and I think that will speak to most campuses. You'll find that once your intake forms are completed, that you're going to have that next version, and in the next after that. So all options are still on the table. We are definitely learning ourselves as we go, and we really value faculty that are interested in this type of work, because it can at times seem very student services heavy. So we definitely value and want some of the instructional faculty feedback.